app in 60 minutes or less. I'm Marissa Skinner from the Desktop Technical Support Team, and with me today are Émilie Rabot, one of our Associate GIS Analysts, and Mike Gorgotsky from Industry Solutions. For those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars, we're recording the session and we'll email you the recording along with a PDF of the slides after the webinar. If you have any follow-up questions about this webinar, feel free to contact Émilie or myself. So if this is one of your first times joining us for a webinar, thank you for joining us. Just as a reminder, when you joined the meeting today, you are automatically connected to the audio broadcast, which will allow you to listen to the webinar on your computer. If you prefer to use your own phone, please click on the Request Phone button in the participant window and dial in using the instructions provided in the pop-up window. This information was also made available to you on your webinar invitation that you received via email. For the best view of the presentation today and all the demos we're going to show, you can maximize the screen with the full screen button. At any time, you can always return back to the original view with the return button on the top tab. If you have any questions about the content we're presenting, please use the Q&A panel. Be sure to choose Ask All Panelists, type your question in the box, and click Send. We'll also pause throughout the webinar to take questions, and we'll take questions again at the end, but feel free to type your question in at any time. Today's session will focus on several specific topics related to using your data in ArcGIS Online or your enterprise organization and within the available apps. We'll first take a look at the different ways you can publish your data to ArcGIS Online and Enterprise and work with it. We'll then see how to best configure a web map to use within an app. Lastly, we'll show you how to create powerful apps to engage your audience. Before we do any of this, we're going to start with a poll. So I'm going to open up our poll here, and we just want to know how many apps have you configured. So we have the options up there. This can be either using ArcGIS Online or your enterprise organization. See some good responses coming in. That's good. So we'll give it just a few more seconds, and then we'll close off the poll. So if you're looking for the poll, it's on the side panel for the WebEx there. All right, so we are going to close off the poll for now. And in this webinar, we're going to be showing you how you can go from maybe a spreadsheet or some underused spatial data and share this data within an app. So the results are just loading up here. We'll show those with you in just a second. All right, and so we'll share these so you can have a look. So it looks like we have a bit of a mix there of the participants. So we'll show you a few new tricks to make your workflows more efficient or learn about new capabilities to enhance your web apps. To get us started, I'm going to hand this off to Émilie.
Thanks, Marissa. So good afternoon or good morning, everyone. We're going to go through a few slides before we get started and chat about best practices to make your data available in ArcGIS Online and ways to prepare it for use within web maps and eventually within one of our configurable apps. We'll be following this workflow throughout the webinar, breaking it down into 3 main steps. And step 1 is about getting your layers ready. So hosted feature layers are layers that have been published to ArcGIS Online. The feature data in these layers is hosted by or stored on ArcGIS Online or your enterprise portal. These layers offer the most flexibility, scalability, and compatibility across the ArcGIS platform. Feature layers are most appropriate for visualizing data on top of your base maps and make up the content of your web map. So there are a few basics to hosted feature layers that we'll demonstrate for all of you. ArcGIS Online has support for a lot of different content types and has also made it easier to bring in content from your computer or from the web. You can even access data you saved on a cloud drive like Google Drive, OneDrive, or Dropbox. Once your data is made available within your organization, you maintain the ability to edit the layer's attributes. Attribute field management is easily achieved through the Layers Item Details page. Adding a field and then populating it using a field calculator can be done using SQL or Arcade. Arcade is ideal for calculations that require more functionality than SQL, as Arcade provides access to attribute values and feature geometry, allowing you to create expressions that include spatial operations. And then there's groups. This is a feature of ArcGIS organizations that help you organize, share, and secure your content. As a group owner, you decide who can find the group, who can join, and who can contribute the content. You also have control over items shared with the group and can invite others to join who have the same account type, whether that's organizational or public. Groups have different purposes. You may want a working group used for sharing in-progress work with a specific group of collaborators like your colleagues. Or you may want a broadcast group for sharing finished content with an identified audience. Whatever your project's purpose, the ideal sharing option is available for you. So we're going to take a pause here and switch gears. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to do a quick demo. So here, what we ultimately want to share with you today is how easy it is to transform a CSV into this dashboard. Today, Marissa and I will be working with fire response data from the City of Edmonton. So what I can do with my dashboard is easily display information like how many calls have been made within a specific time frame. I can find out about how fire stations in the city are responding to different emergencies, and I can even get detailed information about each call. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is head over to my ArcGIS Online organization. And the first thing I want to do is publish that CSV file to ArcGIS Online. I'll start this process by adding the item from a cloud drive. In my case, the CSV I'm using is stored in a Google Drive. I can quickly select what kind of content I'm looking for, whether that's an Excel file, a shapefile, or a file geodatabase. Keep in mind that shapefiles and file geodatabases must be compressed in a zip file to be accessible this way. So I'll go ahead and select that CSV file, and then I can start the review process before I publish it. So I'll make sure to add a title. I'll call it Fire Events. I'll add a tag. So to keep our content organized, Marissa and I have agreed upon using the same tag. That way we just keep our items together and organized. And then I can correct the field types. I'll review the location fields. My attribute table has a latitude and longitude field, and it's being consumed as a location field. And then I can also correct the field type if that's necessary. So I can just select the field type, and here I'll change it to string. The last thing I'm going to do is correct the time zone. So I'm in Edmonton. I'm going to go ahead and change that to Mountain Time, and we'll go ahead and select Publish. We're going to be redirected to the new items detail page. This detail page can be an excellent resource for information regarding the layer. It's good practice to provide a summary, a description, a good title, and tags. And this is to keep your content organized, as well as provide information to end users if you plan on sharing the item. Notice the detail portion on the right-hand side here. So this provides information about the layer itself, and it tells me this is a CSV from a Google Drive, and I can even select this link here, and I'll be rerouted to where that CSV is being hosted in the Google Drive. So I'll select the Data tab on the blue ribbon to view the layer's attribute table, which stores the data for the layer. And so in my case, I know that I have a field that displays the date at which the call was made, and then I also have a field that shows me when that call was wrapped up. So I can toggle between table view here and the fields view. This field view allows you to take a look at the configuration of individual fields, create lists, and a range of values. I'll start by adding a new field, and I'll call that call length. I'll be using this field later on when I'm configuring my dashboard. I'm going to change the type to a double and add that field. So now that I have this field added, we'll go and find it within my table. And what I can do is I can populate it using a calculator. I'll use arcade code. The calculation interface provides a lot of guidance. I'll start by choosing a function. So I know that I'm working with date, so I'll just start by searching date, and this date diff function is exactly what I'm looking for. I'll head back to the Globals tab, and this directs me to all the different fields within my attribute table. And I have this nice guide that helps me populate the function. So I'll highlight ending date, and that corresponds to dispatch close field. Starting date, we'll change that to the dispatch open, and then the age units will be hours. I'll test to see if everything works out. I don't get an error message. I get a result. I'll press OK. Now, I mentioned this earlier. Arcade is ideal for calculations that require more functionality than SQL, as Arcade provides access to attribute values, feature geometry. So let's take a look at that field. I get a message that everything was updated successfully, and there we go. Call length has been populated. Now, my task was to publish the necessary data to my ArcGIS Online organization. However, I won't be the person creating the map. Marissa's going to be taking care of that. So what I'll do is I'll create a group. I'll head to the Group tab, and I'll get started. I'll provide a name. I'll call it Fire Services Dashboard. I'll use that same tag I used earlier. I am going to update the visibility so that only group members can view this group. And then seeing as this is a working group rather than a broadcasting group, I'll make sure that members can update all items. As a result, I'll only be able to invite members of my own organization. I'll invite Marissa to this group. There she is. And I'll send her an invitation. So the next thing I need to do is share the content with Marissa. So I'll go ahead and update the layers sharing capabilities. So I'll select all. I've got the layer I just published, and I also have images that I've published that will be used to customize our symbology later on. So I'll share it with the group, and let's go take a look to make sure that everything is shared properly. Now, as the administrator of this group, I have a lot of settings at my disposal. I can go to Settings and put a delete protection. That way no one will accidentally delete this group. And if I wanted to, there's also a whole bunch of other settings that I could update. So before I let Marissa get started on her map, I'm going to open up the floor to questions.
Great. Thanks a lot there. Emily. There's some great demonstrations. So there's a couple questions that have come in through here, and one question is about that hosted feature layer. Can we basically, if you update the hosted feature layer, does this update data in the Google Drive and vice versa? So actually, when that publishing is done, it takes that data and then it becomes its own feature service there. So what you'd want to do is look at using some of the update feature service capabilities with ArcGIS Online to allow you to do that. So the other thing that we have is someone's adding, can I publish an Excel file that has addresses only and no coordinates? And yeah, in this case here, you can use addresses, you could use coordinates. Either way is going to work. When you do publish from addresses, though, you can't, you won't be able. I'm sorry, you will consume credits in that case for what's happening in that situation, which you have credits that are assigned to in ArcGIS Online. So Keep those questions coming. We'll take some more. We'll take some more as we go on, and I'm going to turn things back over to Marissa now to take us through some more information.
Thanks, Mike. So now we're going to head over to our second portion where we're going to prepare our web map. So in our workflow here, we're at this section where the web map. We just saw how we can prepare our data to be ready to use in a map. Our next step is to display our layers so we can easily communicate with our audience. To do this, we'll add our content to a map, which will be the container for our data and symbolization, which will then go into our app. One of the first things we're going to be highlighting is using vector-based maps. Traditionally, the base maps that are used through ArcGIS Online and other apps to create maps and apps are the raster-based maps. These multi-scale base maps are delivered as pre-rendered image tiles, so JPEG or PNG format, to optimize performance. Vector-based maps are cached and delivered as vector tiles, so the PBF format, and they are rendered client-side based on a style file that is delivered with the vector tiles. These base maps use the same data as the traditional raster base maps. The benefit for you is that with the vector base maps, the features and labels are crisper and there's a more seamless transition between the viewing scales. In our demo, we'll show you how to access these base maps and use them in your own maps. The next thing we're going to be showing you to help out with your maps is using clustering. So if your map has a layer with a large number of points, you can configure clustering to make it easier to visually extract meaningful information from your data. For those who aren't familiar with this functionality, the gist is that when points occur close together, they're replaced by a proportional symbol which will be larger or smaller based on the number of points present. Clustering is applied dynamically at multiple scales, which means that as you zoom out, more points are aggregated into fewer groups, while zooming in creates more cluster groups. If you zoom in all the way, then you can see the individual points. So don't worry, your data is still there. During our demo, we'll show you how we can take all the rows in Imity's spreadsheet and show you how easily you can leverage this functionality to find trends in your data. The next factor is using custom symbology. When choosing point symbols, you'll find many different ones available organized into categories. Often, symbols come in a variety of colors and styles. In addition to these built-in symbols, you can use any hosted image as a custom symbol. This can be used to help match the look and feel of your organization's branding. For best results, use a square PNG, GIF, or JPEG file that is 120 by 120 pixels or less. Larger images will be adjusted to fit. So in our demo, we'll show you how to use your own custom symbology for your maps. At this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start another portion of our demo. So I'm just going to share my screen for you here. Okay, so here we go. You should now be able to see my organization. So here we are in our organization, and we can see that we actually have a notification here. So I'm going to click this notification, and that is the invitation that Amy Lee just sent me. So if I click that, I can see here that I have an invitation to the Fire Services dashboard. I can either choose to join this group or decline. We're going to work together, so I'll click join, and there we go. I'm added to the group. I can open this group up, and I can see all the content that Amy Lee has shared with me. Our next step is we're going to be creating our map. So there's many different ways that you can create a map and different content. In this case, we're going to start by going to the content pane, the content tab here, and we have a create button that we're going to click. So once we do this, we have lots of different types of content available. We can create a layer, we can create a map, we can create a scene, which is a 3D map, or down here we can also create different kinds of apps. In our case, we'll click map, we'll give it a title. So fire events in Edmonton. We'll use our tag that we agreed on. Service. And we'll also add a summary so that we can know what this is about. And we'll click OK. So a map is automatically created for us, and here we see that a base map is added right away for us. Now, in our case, we want to use the vector base maps, so we're going to swap this out by coming over here to our Add Data button. We have lots of different kinds of data that we can add. We can add data from our content using search for layers. We can browse the Living Atlas, which has a number of different layers and content available for us. We can add layers from the web if we have a URL, or we could add layers from a file such as MED CSV directly into the map, but then we don't get the same powerful functionality. Or we could use the map notes, which are already made layers. In our case, we're looking for those base maps, so we'll click Browse the Living Atlas. And we can see we have something like 4,000 layers available. Now we want to filter this to make this a little bit easier to find, so we can just click our filter button here. And then in the categories, we can click the base maps. And we're specifically looking for vector tiles. So there we go. Now I'm looking for a dark gray canvas. So I can do that. And we've narrowed down our results, and we can scroll through and see what we have. Now if I want to know more about one, I can just click on the title, and a pane appears here telling me when it was last updated, so just recently. And I can read about this, so I can see that these are vector tiles. I now want to use this in my map, so I have two options. I can either add it as a layer using the Add to Map button, or I can click Use as Base Map. We're going to use that option because that's what we want, and we can head back to our table of contents and see that our base map is available there. And we can see our map is also updated for this. So we're going to go back now, and we're going to add the main content to this map, so all our layers. So we're going to come back to our Add button. We're going to search for layers this time. And right now we're not seeing any results, but we have our search terms, so we'll clear those. And then I can see the two layers that I own, and I'm going to add those by clicking on this plus button. And you can see that when we did that, the map zoomed to this location. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the data MED shared with me, so I'll come from my content over to my groups, and there are the fire events. So I'll add those in as well. And now these might just take a moment to appear because we can see we do have a lot of data here. So we're going to clean this up, and one of the ways we're going to do that is by turning on that clustering. The first thing we're going to do for turning on clustering is once we come under the fire events, we can see this blue circle, which is the cluster points. We see there in the tooltip, cluster points, so we'll click that once. And then all our points are going to be clustered for us. So you can see it's reduced it down to these smaller groups. And we can control how much clustering we want. We can cluster it more or less so we see more groups available. In this case, I'm going to pick something kind of in the middle, so we'll click that, and we'll click OK. So we've committed our clustering. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to change the symbology for this. So I can come over to my Change Style button. So that's the blue triangle, the red square, and the yellow circle. I'll click it once. And here we go. We have the two-step process to set up our symbology. The first one is to choose which field we want to show the symbols on. So in my case, I want to show this based on which kind of emergency it is. So I'll click Emergency Type. And then the types of symbology are going to be updated. So I want one symbol per type. So I'll click Unique Symbols. And then I want to configure that further. So I'll click Options. Once I'm in here, I can see all the different kinds. And if I want to modify this, I'll come and click on the symbol. And you can see it says Change Symbol, so it's prompting me. And I can click that once. Here I have the power to control color of this shape. I can change the outline if I'd like to something different. I can adjust it so it's a more visible outline. Or I can come over to shape and select different categories of symbology. In our case, we're looking to use an image. So we'll click that once. And then we see this parameter become available asking us for a URL. So we're going to access this orange glow symbol that MED shared with me. And we're going to scroll down to the bottom to this URL. When you share an item with everyone, so the public, you have this URL that becomes available. And we'll be able to use that by copying it. And we're going to come back to our map, and we'll paste that in. And we'll click this plus button to add it. So there we go. So we have our symbol. And I can also use these sliders to make this bigger or smaller as needed. So I will click OK. Now, I can also go back and I can modify this by selecting other symbols. And then once I'm happy with that, I can click OK, done, and there we go. My custom image is now being used in the map. We're going to skip ahead here a little bit because it's going to take a long time to configure each of the symbologies. So instead, here we have the final finished map. We're happy with our symbology. We've updated our custom images. We've added a symbol for the fire stations. So we're done, and we're going to click Save. So I'll come to my Save button, and I'll hit Save. There we go, and my data is now saved. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to decide who we're going to share this with. So I'll click my Share button, and then I have these two checkboxes that allow me to control the sharing. So right now, this content is shared with everyone in the public, as well as my organization, so the Esri Canada Superheroes. If I wanted to make it private, I would just uncheck these two boxes. For now, we are happy with those sharing settings, so we're going to leave it as is. And we're going to just jump right into creating our app. We don't need to go back to our content for this, although that is another option. But in this case, we're just going to click Create a Web App. Once we're here, we have the three options for different kinds. So we have the configurable apps, which you can see here and scroll through. We have the Web App Builder. Emily is going to talk a little bit more about this in the next section, so I'm not going to talk too much about this right now. And we also have the operations dashboard. So here we go. We have a title already populated. I'm just going to add in dashboard. And I'm going to add in a tag, fire service, as well as a summary dashboard of events. And then I'll hit done. And we'll see that our tab has now updated, and we're now looking at our operations dashboard that we just created, and it already added a widget for us. So at this point, I'm going to stop here, and we're going to open the floor up for some more questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand this over.
Great, thanks a lot, Marissa. I really like that symbology there. Very nice symbols and nice way to create them. So yeah, some questions coming in here, and keep these questions coming. If we don't get to your question, we'll take time at the end to ensure we get to as many questions as possible. So there was a question that came in here regarding the clustering that Marissa had done. And is there a limit to the number of points for clustering? So in your feature layer itself, if you're using that for clustering, you can't have anything more than 50, getting the number mixed up here, 50,000 features there in the layer. So that's one way you want to make sure you're not approaching that if you're going to be looking at clustering. And another question was, what was the user type that was being used in the demonstrations here by Marissa and Emily? So both the user types are the creator user types. The same functionality would be available with the different GIS professional user types as well. And I know Emily has a slide coming up which speaks to the user types in a little bit regarding how they work as well. So keep those questions coming. Great to see excitement about the demos that we're showing. And I'm going to turn things over to Emily next to take us through some more slides. Emily.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for those questions. So let's take a look at our last section, where we'll discuss using apps to showcase our data. We're now arrived at the third component of our workflow. Our hosted layers have been neatly configured and then added to a web map that's been styled to our liking. So thanks for doing that, Marissa. Now it's time to configure a web app that is both appropriate for our data and useful for the intended audience. So web apps are a great way to inform, educate, entertain, and inspire people about a wide variety of topics. With ArcGIS Online, it's easy to create a web app from a map without the need for specialized development skills. You might be wondering, what's an ArcGIS app? So they're templates that you can use to embed your web maps in, providing end users with access to added functionality when interacting with your data and maps. All you need to do is configure the settings, no coding required. The other benefit of the templates is that you can reuse the same map in multiple different styles of application. So these apps are included with your ArcGIS subscription, whether your organization uses ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So keep in mind your user identity when attempting to use, edit, or create content. So a viewer can view items that are shared with them by other ArcGIS users. This user type is ideal for members of an organization who need to view content in a secure environment. Viewers can't create, edit, share, or perform analysis on items or data. Editors can view and edit data in maps and apps that are shared with them by other users. This user type is ideal for those who need to access and edit data that's shared with them and use ArcGIS apps like Web App Builder and configurable apps. And then creators, which is the user type we were using, have the ability to create content, administer the organization, and share content for use. The creator user type is designed for those who need to create a web map or app, perform in-depth spatial analysis, and do other kinds of analysis using analysis tools in ArcGIS Online. So the first step is always about finding the correct app. And keep the end user in mind. Consider what purpose the app should have. So different configurable apps, Web App Builder, and Operations Dashboard offer various functionality, such as layout and color schemes, editing and identify tools, social media feeds, and side-by-side map viewers. There's so much more. In my case, I want to display a large amount of data, showcase the map alongside graphs and charts to visualize trends and patterns. So Marissa and I have chosen to use the Operations Dashboard for our project. When designing a dashboard, the best first step is to come up with a list of questions that the end users would like to know at a glance. The following questions are applicable to our scenario. How many fire emergencies are there currently? What kind of emergencies are fire services responding to? Where are these emergencies happening, and what fire station is responding, and how long does it take them? So let's take a look at my dashboard, and we'll start configuring it together, or continue configuring it together. So I've already configured a few elements, and as you can see, the elements of my dashboard always occupy 100% of my browser screen. I currently have 6 elements. There's the map, of course, and then I have the indicator showing the amount of incident calls, a list showing detailed information about each incident, including the type, the location, and the time at which it occurred. I have a serial chart that breaks down how many calls each fire station responded to, and I've got a header panel as well as a side panel, which display some date and category selectors that allow the end user to quickly filter data. Now, earlier I configured a new field called call length, and as promised, I am going to use that field in an element. So I'm going to go up to the top here to this plus sign. This drop-down menu offers me all the different kind of elements that I have access to. I'm going to choose a gauge. So the first thing I'm always prompted to choose is which layer within my map I'm going to use. So I'll select that emergency response layer. Now I want to show an average of each call length. Right now I'm just showing every single record in my data table. So for value type, I'll stay with statistic. I'll change that to an average, and then I'm prompted to select that specific field. And there you have it. That's call length that I configured earlier. Now right now my maximum value is set to 100. But most of my calls don't even get near 100 hours. So we're actually going to change that to 5, as that's a bit more appropriate. We'll head over to the Gauge tab and change the style. I prefer meter. And then in the General tab, I can do a bit more style editing. So I'll add a title, average call length in hours. And then I will just style it a bit more, and that looks a lot better. So I'll press done. Now, every single one of these elements, if you hover over the top left corner, you'll see a little blue menu pop up. So this menu, I can get a little drag and drop icon, and I can dock that element wherever I find, wherever I like. I'll adjust the size and positioning. With this menu, I could also find the configure button, so I can head back to those configuring options. I could also duplicate that element or delete it entirely. Next, I want to add a selector. These can be added to a header or side panel. I've already configured a date selector within my top panel. So as you can see, I can filter down to how many emergencies have happened in the last 7 days, 28 days, and so on. On my side panel, I've also have the option of selecting specific fire stations and get specific information about each one of these. I have another selector that allows me to filter specific kinds of emergency types or call types. And what we'll do next is we're going to add a third category selector. So these are great to allow users to interact with your dashboard, interact with your map, and get to know trends and patterns within your data. So I'm going to go up here at the top and select Add a Category Selector. For the display, I'm going to show grouped categories, confirm that layer, and then select a field. And I have a field that's called weekday. Right now, I can select any single one of these layers. I always get a preview of what the element is going to look like, but I'd like to add a none option. That way, I don't need to have an item selected or a feature selected for the filtering, but I'm going to change that to display all. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Right now, it's showing up in my side panel, but if I select it, nothing really happens. So this is where actions become important, and they're really the coolest thing about dashboards. Actions describe what happens when an end user interacts with the dashboard element. So that could be a filtering action, a zooming action, or a flashing action. So one thing I forgot to do is add a label. So I'm going to add that really quickly, day of the week. And then what I'll do, elements that have the ability to have actions will have this tab here, and I'll go over there. So what I can do is I can filter the data that shows up in the indicator panel, in the list. We'll add it to the serial chart and the gauge. And I also want filtering to happen on that specific layer within the map. So we'll press done. So say I want to know what kind of or how many calls happen on a Saturday. You notice that the list, the indicator panel, as well as the serial chart all react accordingly. So I'll go ahead and save that because my dashboard is now ready to be shared with a wider audience. So as I mentioned, there's so many ways that you can share data and maps depending on your needs. So I've been able to use this same map in multiple apps. I've got it used within a story map. I could even use it within a web app builder. And so here, this is a great app to use if you want your end user to maybe perform analysis on your data, do some queries, and just interact with that data. So I can add a bunch of different widgets. They're down here, and just added functionality with your app. So with that, I'm going to hop back over to the presentation. And I've got just a few more wrap-up slides, and then we're going to try and answer some questions afterwards. So just to sum up, over the course of this webinar, we learned about what you can do with your data in ArcGIS Online, from ways to publish it to create a hosted feature layer, make adjustments so that it suits your needs, and then sharing it with members of your organization. We also touched on ways to customize a map beyond the default base map in symbology to make your content truly unique. Finally, we shared with you how to create and configure elements in an operations dashboard as a way to bring your spreadsheets alive and offer an interactive way to visualize your data. So there are a lot of great resources out there, whether it's about ArcGIS apps or ArcGIS Online. If you're interested in using Operations Dashboard, but you're not too sure where to start, Esri Canada's team has published a YouTube series about getting started with Operations Dashboard. There's also a great blog post by Esri Canada's Samaya Siddiqui called I Didn't Know You Could Do That, and please check those out. We've also got a couple of other things coming up, a few webinars in just a few months. We've got Tooling Up to be an ArcGIS developer, and that's coming up on May 9th, so just around the corner. And then there's also Taking the Fear Out of Change, immediate benefits of switching to ArcGIS Pro, and that's in mid-June. So mark those dates in your calendar. If you're interested in training courses, we have a few that are coming up related to ArcGIS Online and apps. So ArcGIS Online for publishers, creating story maps with ArcGIS, as well as configuring web apps using Web App Builder for ArcGIS. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and participating in today's webinar. We're going to email you a recording of the webinar shortly, as well as a PDF of the slides. Additionally, we'll post the webinar recording to our archive page when that's ready. We'd also like to get your thoughts on the presentation, so please fill out the survey that comes up when you exit the webinar. We'll also stop the recording at this time, but we're going to stay on the line to continue taking your questions.